Provincial Town, Part 1, The Disappearance. The town of Greenfield lay nestled in a quiet valley in the state of Vermont. Old wooden houses with shingled roofs lined the narrow streets, covered with autumn leaves. Each building seemed to tell a story of its own. Some had been home to families for decades, while others had just moved in. Yet the town maintained its steady rhythm. Morning jogs along the lake, the chimes of the clocks in the town center, the smell of fresh bread from Baker's Corner Bakery. It was here that Emily Carter lived, a 28-year-old history teacher at the local school. She loved her life: morning walks with her dog along the waterfront, evening coffees at the small cafe near the center, cozy nights with books and music. But this autumn, something in the air felt different, a silence that seemed too loud, the gaze of strangers lingering on her longer than necessary. Evening began to fall over the town. Emily, as usual, walked down the narrow street toward home after meeting a colleague. Waiting for her was a small house with a garden and an old wooden porch that creaked underfoot. She loved that creak because it reminded her of the safety of home. But that evening, the house felt alien, almost hostile. She didn't notice the dark truck slowly following her. Neither the headlights nor the rumble of the engine seemed suspicious because various vehicles occasionally passed through the town. But when Emily opened the gate, the truck stopped nearby. From the darkness, two men in black appeared, their faces covered with masks. "Don't scream," one of them whispered, gripping her shoulder. "Everything will be fine if you cooperate." She tried to fight, but fear made her legs give way. Her scream was muffled by a sleeve and fabric that felt impenetrable. The street lamp flickered on the truck's metal surfaces as she was shoved inside. The doors slammed shut, leaving behind only silence and the autumn wind. In the heart of Greenfield lived Jason Hale, a 32-year-old detective in the local police department. He had long considered the town peaceful, almost boring, but a phone call that night shattered his sense of routine. "Detective Hale, a young woman has gone missing. Her name is Emily Carter. The caller is a neighbor," said the voice on the other end. A chill ran down Jason's spine. His intuition screamed that this was no ordinary disappearance. He had known Emily since childhood, the daughter of the local librarian, intelligent, cautious, and simply a good person. He drove to the scene, navigating the narrow streets lit only by the yellowish glow of the streetlights. Neighbors stood in groups, whispering, some even crying. The detective examined the garden and the porch. There was almost no signs of struggle, just minor scratches on the wooden siding of the porch. This was alarming. The kidnappers were careful, possibly professionals. He recorded the neighbors' statements and checked cameras on nearby houses. Nothing recognizable appeared on any of the recorded tapes. Only the shadow of the truck moving back down the street and elusive silhouettes. "This looks like a planned operation," Jason said to himself, feeling the pressure mounting. "And I fear we are already late." At Emily's home, her phone lay on the table. Her friend Clara Wilson, who habitually checked in on Emily every evening, had tried calling several times. When her calls went unanswered, she felt a fear that could not be ignored. Clara arrived at Emily's address and met Jason at the scene. Together they began searching for any traces, scratches, footprints, any clue pointing to where Emily might have been taken. Everything indicated one thing: the kidnappers acted cautiously, knew the town, and may have been watching her for some time. Jason realized this was no accident. Someone had targeted a specific individual, and the purpose behind the disappearance remained unknown. The town, which once seemed quiet and safe, suddenly turned into a maze of suspicion and danger. Meanwhile, Emily opened her eyes in a dark room. The truck was parked somewhere on a remote road, and the doors were locked. Light filtered through narrow cracks. She tried to recall the kidnappers' faces, but fear drowned out every detail. "Where am I? What do they want?" she whispered to herself, trying to find a way out. But the room was secure, windowless, and the doors were solid. From this moment, a race against time begins. Jason must find any trace. Clara strives to help, and Emily must understand who is behind her abduction and why. The shadows of the town conceal danger, and anyone who dares to step outside could become the next target.
The morning in Greenfield began with a cold fog that enveloped the narrow streets. Jason Hale returned to his precinct, where tension and anxiety seemed to radiate from every corner. He began gathering all the data on Emily, her work contacts, colleagues, friends, even recent social media messages. But the deeper he delved, the less clarity he found. Nothing unusual, nothing that could raise suspicion, Jason muttered, reviewing Emily's recent activity on her computer. Everything looks perfectly normal, and that is the biggest mystery. Meanwhile, Clara Wilson decided to help. She had known Emily for almost 20 years, and her intuition told her something had been off long before the kidnapping. Clara collected her friend's personal belongings, examined her diary, and looked through the notes she had left behind. There were few, but strange references to people and places no one had known about before. "Jason, look at this," Clara said, showing a note with the address of an old farm on the outskirts of town. She wrote something about meeting someone the night before she disappeared. Jason felt his heart tighten. This was the first serious lead. He decided that checking this address might provide the first clues about the kidnappers. The farm lay a few kilometers from town. When Jason arrived, he noticed an old barn, partially dilapidated, with peeling paint and overgrown weeds. No one was in sight, but there were tire tracks nearby and several empty energy drink bottles. "They were here very recently," Jason whispered, taking photos of the tracks. "Perhaps this place is used as a temporary hideout." Meanwhile, somewhere in a dark warehouse, Emily tried to assess her chances. She realized the kidnappers were not merely holding her, they were watching, recording every move. The tiny room was cold, and the light from a lamp barely illuminated the space. "I need to do something," she thought, examining an old phone left by the kidnappers. It didn't work in the normal way, but she held a faint hope that she might send a signal. At the same time, Jason and Clara uncovered another important fact. Several local residents had seen the truck on the night of the kidnapping. Everyone described it as dark, without license plates, but with subtle stickers on the rear doors, almost imperceptible. "Someone planned this in advance," Jason concluded, "and they knew the town better than we do." The nights grew increasingly tense. Jason received anonymous calls in which only a rustle and a hoarse voice repeated the same message: "Drop the case or pay the price." The sense of danger escalated, yet he understood he had nowhere to retreat. His duty was to save Emily and uncover who was behind this sinister abduction. Emily, meanwhile, searched for a chance to escape. She noticed a small window hidden behind a shelf stacked with old boxes. It was dark, cold, but it was a possibility. She began planning her escape, feeling her heart pound with fear and adrenaline. "I can't just sit and wait," she whispered to herself, trying not to reveal her thoughts to the kidnappers, who likely slept in shifts. At the same time, Jason discovered a strange trail. On one of the town streets, odd graffiti had been left. At first glance, it seemed random, but he sensed it was a message. Using his knowledge of cryptography and local culture, he deciphered the first letters, which pointed to a warehouse at the edge of town. "This is our next step," he told Clara, "and I hope this time we get there before they're ready." A mix of anxiety and hope filled the atmosphere. Jason knew every minute was critical for Emily's life. Clara was ready to support him in any plan. Together they prepared for a risky raid on the warehouse, where the kidnapped woman might be held. The scene was approaching its climax. The quiet of the provincial town had become deceptive as unseen eyes monitored every move. The investigators proceeded cautiously, each sound in the night air seeming like a warning. Meanwhile, Emily tried to prepare for her escape. She studied the kidnappers' movements, noting their patterns, hoping to find a moment to flee. This night would prove decisive. Every move was a risk, every action a matter of life and death. The shadowed threat and real danger intertwined into a single web, where the main players remained Emily and Jason.
Night had fallen over Greenfield, plunging the provincial town into thick darkness. The streets were empty, with only the streetlights casting long shadows on the sidewalks. Jason and Clara were preparing for a raid on the warehouse, where, according to their information, Emily might be held. "We have to move quietly," Jason said, checking his gun and flashlight. "One mistake and it could cost her life." Clara nodded, holding a tablet with data on security patrols and camera locations. They knew the kidnappers didn't sleep and used high-tech surveillance. Meanwhile, Emily sat in a dark corner of the warehouse, clutching her phone. She had managed to hack part of the signal and sent a short message to Jason. "I'm alive. Don't come in immediately. Patrol signals are active." Jason read the message and felt a surge of adrenaline. This meant her condition was better than he had feared, but time was running out. They approached the warehouse from both sides. Jason moved through the abandoned courtyard, hiding behind containers, while Clara monitored the signals on her tablet, guiding him along the least noticeable routes. "Two patrols here," Clara whispered. "The third is near the back entrance, but its patrol radius is smaller. We have a chance." The internal tension was rising. Jason knew that every step could jeopardize the entire operation. His heart pounded so hard it seemed it might burst from his chest. At that moment, Emily noticed one of the kidnappers stepping away from his post. She quietly crawled toward an old ventilation hatch, which might serve as her escape route. "This is my chance," she whispered, "but the risk is enormous." Jason and Clara decided to split up. He would approach the back entrance, and Clara would control the digital signals and monitor the patrols. Their radios whispered instructions softly. Every word mattered. Jason reached the back entrance and quietly opened the door. The warehouse was dimly lit, the smell of old straw and machine oil mixing with the damp air. He spotted Emily's silhouette in the dark corner. "Emily," he whispered, "it's okay, I'm here." She ran toward him, trying not to make a sound. Her face was pale, her eyes wide, but hope burned brightly in them. At the same time, one of the kidnappers, returning to his post, noticed movement in the darkness. His eyes narrowed. "Someone's there!" he shouted, raising his flashlight. The situation escalated instantly. Jason grabbed Emily's hand and pulled her toward the ventilation hatch. Clara saw on her tablet that the third patrol was approaching and quickly activated a distraction, a brief flicker of light on an external sensor to divert the guard. Emily went through first. Jason closed the hatch behind her and followed into the narrow tunnel. Underground, it was dark, damp, and smelled of old metal. They crawled for several minutes, each sound echoing louder than it actually was. "We're almost out," Jason whispered, "just a little further." The tunnel's exit led them to the other side of the warehouse where Clara's car was waiting. The vehicle was inconspicuous, but fast enough to leave town quickly. Once inside, Jason exhaled with relief, though the tension didn't ease. They knew the kidnappers could quickly realize the escape, and now all the anxiety shifted to the road and the plan for Emily's further protection. "We can't go back," Jason said, pressing the gas pedal.
They'll be waiting at every turn. On the way, Emily finally spoke her first words. "Thank you, Jason. I thought it was the end." "No, we're not done yet. We'll find out who's behind this, and they will pay for what they've done." The darkness of nighttime Greenfield was pierced by headlights. Ahead lay a long road, but the first risky step towards rescuing Emily had been successful. They knew one thing: this was only the beginning, and a dangerous plan was unfolding in this small town, one that could change the lives of many.
Morning in Greenfield was foggy, the streets were empty, and only a few pedestrians hurried to work. Jason, Clara, and Emily had stopped at a small motel on the outskirts of town. They knew the kidnappers were already searching for them, but so far they had remained unnoticed. "We can't stay here long," Jason said, spreading out a map and considering their escape options. "They know our faces, our car. We need a plan." Emily still couldn't believe she was alive. Her hands shook and her eyes reflected both fear and exhaustion. "I feel like they didn't just kidnap me. They're looking for something else," she whispered, leaning on the motel table. "I remember one of them saying, 'She has what we need.'" Jason nodded. His suspicions were confirmed. The kidnapping had more than just a physical objective. They were searching for something important, something Emily might know or possess. Clara opened her laptop, reviewing the data they had gathered during the escape. "I found the first traces. The kidnappers are using several points to transmit information. If we track them, we can find out who's behind this," she pointed to a map marked with symbols. Jason took the tablet and began analyzing the routes. They noticed a pattern. All the kidnappers' movements originated from an old warehouse south of town. "Something is being stored there," Jason said. "We need to get there, but carefully. Traps could be anywhere." During the preparations for the raid, Emily shared details she had noticed while being held by the kidnappers. "They're not just locals. It's an organization. They have computers, servers, even their own network, and they're very well organized." Jason felt a chill run down his spine. This meant they were up against not just a group of criminals, but an entire structure that could have connections beyond the town. In the evening, they set out for the warehouse. Darkness and fog gave them cover, but also increased the risk. Jason, Emily, and Clara moved cautiously, hiding behind containers and abandoned cars. "Be ready for anything," Jason whispered. "We don't know how many people are inside." Clara connected her tablet to a small drone they had prepared for surveillance. Silhouettes of people moving inside the warehouse appeared on the screen. 5 guards, one controlling the cameras. They're monitoring every inch of the area. Jason and Emily found a small hole in the warehouse wall, an old ventilation duct leading directly inside. It was their only chance to enter unnoticed. They crawled for several minutes, hearts pounding wildly, every sound seeming amplified. Inside, they discovered a warehouse filled with high shelves, boxes, and electronic equipment. Documents lay on a table, and files with the names of local residents flickered across monitors. "They're watching everyone," Emily whispered, examining the screens. Jason moved closer to the documents. He saw information about local businessmen, officials, and even the police. "They're planning something big," he said, "and we have to stop them before it's too late." At that moment, one of the warehouse doors creaked. Someone was approaching. The tension skyrocketed. "Hide!" Jason shouted. They crouched behind a shelf, watching several people pass by, discussing the operation's details. "It seems they're expecting someone from outside," Clara whispered softly through the radio. It was then they realized Emily's kidnapping was no accident. She had become the key to the organization's plan, and now their mission was not only to rescue her, but to uncover the entire conspiracy threatening the town and possibly beyond. After the guards moved away, Jason, Emily, and Clara quickly photographed the documents and copied files onto flash drives. They knew every minute counted. "We have to leave this warehouse without anyone realizing we were here," Jason said, closing the last folder. They slowly crawled back through the ventilation duct, hearts racing, but adrenaline fueling their movements. Once outside, the night was still dark, and the fog made their movements less noticeable. "We've taken the first step," Emily said, breathing in the cold night air. But this is only the beginning. Jason nodded. Ahead lay a long and dangerous road, the road to the truth which could cost lives. They got into Clara's car and drove to a new safe house. Ahead awaited new traces, new clues, and perhaps new enemies. But one thing was certain. The conspiracy was no longer a secret, and they would not let it remain hidden.
The final game. The next day in Greenfield began gloomily. The fog slowly lifted, revealing the town in its usual provincial essence. But for Jason, Emily, and Clara, everything was already different. They knew the kidnappers would not back down, and that the real danger was just beginning. They're tracking everything, from phones to cameras in town, Clara said, sitting at her laptop and checking the network logs. If we make even one mistake, it's over. Jason listened, focused on the route to the warehouse, where, according to his information, the organization's main hub was located. This time, they decided to act decisively, infiltrate the building and obtain evidence that would expose the conspiracy once and for all. "We can't just take the documents," he said. "We have to stop their operation here and now." Emily nodded, though her heart pounded wildly. She felt fear, but also determination. After a night in the hands of the kidnappers, she could no longer remain a victim. Now she was part of the plan, part of the team, destined to save not only herself, but the town. They approached the warehouse, this time during the day. The concrete building looked ordinary, but every detail could be a trap. Jason carefully opened a side entrance, and the three friends slipped inside, unnoticed. The interior space of the warehouse was large, with high shelves and several workstations. On one of the monitors flickered a plan showing kidnappings and other organizational operations. Jason stepped closer and froze. The screen displayed video footage from a camera capturing the most recent attempt to kidnap Emily. "They had planned this for months," Clara whispered. "And we are the last barrier between them and complete control." Suddenly, the warehouse doors flung open, and a man in a black suit entered. His gaze was cold, and his posture confident. "I've been expecting you," he said in a low voice. "You've gone too far." Jason understood immediately. This was the head of the organization, the person behind the kidnappings and manipulations in the town. He was dangerous, but Jason knew there was no longer any escape. "We know everything," Jason replied, restraining his fear, "and we won't let you continue." A brief but tense confrontation erupted. Emily helped Clara gather the documents, while Jason distracted the leader, using any objects around him. The fight was intense, shouts, blows, and quick movements between the shelves. Finally, the organization's leader grabbed a weapon, but at that moment, Jason hurled a heavy object, diverting his attention. Emily and Clara finished copying all the data onto flash drives. "Now or never!" Clara shouted. They dashed for the exit, using a back door Jason had previously noted. After several minutes of chaotic escape, they ran outside, where Clara's car was waiting. "Quick, get us out of here," Jason commanded. The car sped through the town, with black pursuer vehicles flashing behind them. But the data they had saved was secure. They knew the truth would now be revealed, and no one could hide it. About an hour later, they reached a safe house on the outskirts of town. The friends took deep breaths, feeling relief, but also understanding that the fight was not over. "This is just the beginning," Emily said, looking at the flash drives with the documents. "Now the truth will be known to everyone." Jason nodded. We did everything we could. Now the public must see what's happening. And though they may be looking for us, they no longer control the situation. Clara connected one of the flash drives to an encrypted channel, transmitting the data to independent media outlets. Within minutes, the first confirmations began to arrive. Information about the kidnappings, the control over the town, and the organization's manipulations was going public. They sat silently, watching the news come online. The town was changing before their eyes. "We survived," Emily whispered. "But now the responsibility is on all of us. People need to know the truth." Jason looked at his friends. He saw fatigue, fear, but also determination and strength. "We've changed the game, and although the danger hasn't disappeared, we've proven that one team can stand against the darkness." The sun began to rise over the town, illuminating the buildings with golden light. The provincial town appeared peaceful, but the heroes knew the war for truth continued. And although their mission was complete, their lives would never be the same again.